G'day guys, welcome back to a new episode of the Boundary Riders podcast, episode 105. A lot to talk about today. With the conclusion of round one, we have a lot of topics, including one of the worst suspensions I think I've seen in the last few years. Other news, of course, AFL Fantasy chat. So let's not waste any more of your time. Let's roll the intro and get straight into it. Welcome to the Boundary Riders podcast, your one-stop shop for all your AFL content needs.
He looks at his options, and Jack Ginnivan says, "Boys, you brought me to the club to do just this!"
But this guy has Flog written all over him.
From attack down, Reed sprints away from Petrarca, leaves him in his wake, takes a second bounce, takes a third. The sheer arrogance of Harley Reid. Finish the job, young man!
So let's get into the footy news from the week that was. So guys, as you can tell, my brother's not here today. I don't really know how many more episodes he'll be able to do at the moment. Just seems like he's got a lot of work stuff going on, so that's more than fine. He will be here for his weekly segment of the betting, so get excited for that one. That just comes straight after the tips and the preview to round one. But let's get into some AFL chat throughout the weekend. So first of all, interesting news topic to come through was the fact that round one had the most amount of supporters attend ever in AFL history. They had 431,505 people go to the AFL over the weekend. So that's really great signs for the AFL as a whole. People who say the game is dead, I think they're just stupid. It shows that the game is not as popular. It shows that it is so much popular than it once was. I think the game is as exciting as it has ever been, in my opinion. I know there are some things that do piss people off, umpiring, the suspension, which we'll get, some suspensions, which we'll get to in a moment, but overall the round was great. There were a couple of floggings, which weren't really the greatest, but I think a lot of it had to do with opening round, or maybe not a lot of it, but there were definitely points of opening round having issues with the games itself. But of course, we started with a great game, Richmond v Carlton, a massive crowd to see one of the biggest upsets we've ever seen. Some people are calling it the worst loss that Carlton have had in 30 years. I'd be up there in saying that. They got smashed in that second half. They became one of the most terrified teams I've ever seen. We were watching it live on the channel and it was a bloodbath in that second half. Carlton was so scared of going near the football. And you got to think as well, with the most attended round ever, we had a game between Melbourne and the Giants at the MCG that had 23,000 at it, which didn't look very good on the screen. So to have that game involved in round one and to still have the highest attended round in AFL ever, I think that's brilliant. Speaking of the Richmond-Carlton game, great news for Richmond fans. Sam Lalor in round one gets the first Rising Star nomination of the year. I'm not too surprised. I think there were some other candidates. We had Xavier Lindsay, Levi Ashcroft, Murphy Reid in those 10 minutes was brilliant. Max Hall as well for St Kilda was very good. We saw a couple of others as well who shined bright. But Sam Lalor, I think he set the tone right in the first game of the year. Well, first game for them anyway, first game of round one, and he did brilliantly. Looking at the stats that he had 18 touches, 8 score involvements, 2 goals, got them in front in that game. He was brilliant and looks like a future star. Obviously very, very early on, but very good performance from him, and hopefully he can just continue that. I mean, I know a lot of people in the... I don't think he was really one of the favourites to win the Rising Star at the start of the season or going into the future markets. But, I mean, right now, you'd have to put him up there. I know he's playing for a team that's probably going to struggle this year. But, I mean, if he can average around 15 to 20 touches, average nearly a goal a game, I think he could very well win it. The players around him, it shows how good the draft was. I mean, Max Hall wasn't even picked in the top 30, I don't believe, and he's really performed well. But then you got the top draftees. Ashcroft was brilliant. He could have also won the Rising Star. Murphy Reid, I don't think he would have won it this week, but he had a really good 10-minute patch and looks pretty dangerous up forward for Fremantle. Was touted as a very good midfielder who could kick goals. So Fremantle got a genuine star in the making there. And Xavier Lindsay, a player that really wasn't talked about a lot outside of the four walls of Melbourne in the preseason. Didn't really have the greatest preseason games, but when it came to round one, boy did the kid shine. So another great option. And then there's others that some didn't even get to play in round one. Some started as a sub, looking at Draper and Langford. And I mean, if they can just start playing into the game, we saw how good Draper was in the preseason, and he was pretty good in the second half in the Crows game. So I think a lot of those top draftees in the previous draft will be getting Rising Star nominations throughout the year. And it could actually be a very close race to see who wins the Rising Star, because we've seen in previous years, usually it's only one player. One player gets the rising star, and it's kind of like, oh, who cares? We don't really need to see who wins it. But there could actually be a genuine conversation this year as to who is the outright winner. So we'll have to wait and see on that front. Now on some sad news on Gold Coast point of view. Unfortunately, Charlie Ballard in the massive win, their record-breaking win for the Suns, it's been confirmed that he's done his ACL. That's really unfortunate. He's one of the really good players for them. He's such an unsung hero for the Gold Coast. So I'm really sad to see that for them. He's such a good player. Maybe if they make finals, I mean, it was a really good performance against the Eagles. If they could make finals, maybe he makes it in a miracle return. But it seems very unlikely. And it's a player that it's going to be hard to replace for the Suns because Ballard, if you don't really watch many Gold Coast games, you probably don't know much about him, but he is one of the best defenders in the game, I think, at the moment, Charlie Ballard. And, and one of them that nearly beats him probably is Sam Collins, another defender at the Suns. So we'll see how that plays out. Hopefully he can make a full recovery sooner rather than later. Maybe a finals return. I doubt that, but we'll just have to wait and see. And then on Essendon, just want to quickly point out a couple of injuries from their game in the weekend. Jordan Ridley will be out with the 1 week for the concussion at this stage. That is good news. And Kyle Langford looks like it's a pretty, not a serious hamstring, but it is going to keep him out for at least a month, up to 6 weeks. So that really limits Essendon's scoring power now that Kyle Langford's going to be out for over a month. So really sad news there for Bombers fans. But I want to talk about this interview that happened over today as recording of this, from Ken Hinkley. So if you don't know, Ken Hinkley over the week, they obviously got smashed on Saturday by Collingwood by over 90 points. And then had his weekly interview in South Australia. A lot of the journalists were asking him questions like, oh, did you hear the interview? Did you hear the comments from Kane Cornes on the Channel 7 show? I can't even fucking remember what it's called. Or on a bunch of like pundits, media pundits, I guess you could call them, on SEN, like David King calling for Ken Hinkley to potentially step aside now and let Josh Carr officially take over early. And I thought it was very interesting the way he responded. I actually kind of liked the way he responded. So a bunch of journalists asked him all these questions, basically trying to bait him into confirming or denying the comments from the David Kings and the Kane Corneses. And he basically said, do you have a question to ask me, or are you just going to ask me things that have been said in the media from different media pundits? And all the journos were like fucking chewing down their fingernails, pissing themselves in their seats, because they didn't actually have their own actual questions to ask Ken Hinkley. They were too scared to ask them, which I think is very interesting because, granted, I think a lot of people would like to know that. I get it. But also, you can ask your own questions or you can frame it in your own way rather than saying, oh, did you hear what Kane Cornes said? Did you hear what David King said? You sound like a fucking bitch. Just ask him yourself. Do you think the players are confused? Do you think that there's an issue here? A lot of people are talking about it, I know. But my question to you is, Ken, are you going to be here towards the end of the season? Do you still want to coach this team until the end of the year? And he just went back at them and said, are you going to ask me a question or are you going to be a little pussy bitch? I loved it. But on Port Adelaide themselves, very poor performance against Collingwood. Look, even though, yes, we're all excited about how Richmond played on the weekend and, brilliant there, smash Carlton, fuck Carlton, all that sort of bullshit. End of the day, I think Port Adelaide will come out with a fire in their belly and they'll beat up on Richmond a little bit on the weekend. I think that Richmond, I can't see them doing that again. I mean, they could very well, if they bring that pressure every single week, they'll be a good team to watch, which is, I think, all we can really ask for as AFL fans. If they can bring that, most weeks, I'd be happy with that. But I do think that it's going to be, I think they had a huge amount of like, oh, we're getting talked, people are telling we can't even win a game. Like, we're going to come out and show everyone how good we are. I think that is going to fade a little bit quickly for the Tigers. So I think Port Adelaide will come out this week, have a pretty convincing win against Richmond. We talk about, I get to the tips obviously later, but I guess that's one I just spoiled for you. I think Port Adelaide will respond. I don't know how the succession plan is going to work very well for Port Adelaide. It's too early to tell. One thing I will say though, Dan Houston, oh my God, Port Adelaide gave they had to ask for more. I'm sorry. Maybe this will be like a future trade that we look back on, like a Chris Judd, Josh Kennedy trade. Maybe we look back at it like that. Like, for the time being, Carlton probably won it. because they got a star player, Chris Judd. But, you know, in 10 years' time, you know, West Coast potentially probably won that trade because they got a guy who won Coleman medals. They won premierships with the guy, was arguably one of the best West Coast key forwards in their history. So you could look at it both ways. Maybe that's something that we look at, and we look at the players like they picked up from those draft picks like Joe Berry. Maybe he becomes a future star. We don't know. But right now, fuck, they asked for unders, bro. They should have asked for so much more. Now, I understand that Kane Corns is sitting there flogging him off, talking about how great a player he is. But if this is like the first real time you get to see Dan Houston, because now he's playing at the biggest club in the game, and not playing for a South Australian team that you only see maybe once or twice a year at most. He is a very good player. There's a reason why he's been a dual All-Australian. He's not just there to make up numbers at halfback. He is a very good player. He's a great user. He's a good defender. He will run all day. He's a great decision maker. He's a good leader. I don't know what else to say. He's a very good player. And Collingwood got an absolute fucking steal. Now, yes, they got rid of Joe Richards to go there as well. But again, maybe down the track we'll see that this will be working out for Port Adelaide as well. But right now, they asked for way too many unders. They should have, at the very least, you got to ask for more. At the worst, you tell him to stay because he was contracted. But, you know, it is round one. It is the end of round one. So, you know, every single person is overreacting. You know, Carlton are going to finish bottom. Richmond, potential premiers. Sam Lalor for the Brownlow. You know, all the overreactions are coming through. So, I mean, bear with me. But let's move on. I want to talk about this Jackson Archer suspension. So there were a couple of other players that got suspended over the week, and some are going to be challenging, including Jackson Archer. If you don't know, in the North Melbourne v Bulldogs game over the weekend, we saw a young defender for the Bulldogs in Luke Cleary went down for the ball, and I think he fumbled it at the moment. I don't have a clip in front of me. I'm trying to remember from memory. But he went for the ball, he fumbled it, and then went in to dive for the football. And as he was doing that, Jackson Archer was running the other direction and cleaned him out. Well, didn't really clean him out. He kind of like tried to avoid it, but also stood in the way of Cleary. And obviously, on the sight of it, Cleary's head goes back. He comes off. He was on the ground for minutes and then got taken to hospital with concussion. And it was a tragic situation. Luckily, good news that Cleary is okay. But on the other side of it, Archer was extremely lucky he didn't get his legs snapped off. He didn't get broken leg, something to do with his legs. He was very lucky to walk away with it uninjured. And then the AFL were like, "Are you okay?" And he was like, yeah, I'm all good. That's fine. And they're like, "Yeah, good. Here's a 3-week suspension." No, you don't get a 3-week suspension for that. So we're bringing the Flog of the Week, of course, back for the week. Michael Christian, the MRO, I think he's been nominated last year. He gets the nomination for episode 105 for him handing a 3-week ban to Jackson Archer, because I understand that a concussion is a bad thing and they're trying to do everything they can to combat the massive problem with concussion in the AFL and in sport in general. But what are you asking Archer to do? He has to, one, not go towards the football, which is what you're trained to do. Go to the football, cause a contest, get players around the contest, because it was a one-on-one at halfback for his teammate and Cleary running for the ball. Archer's coming the other way for support. He doesn't know that Cleary is going to fumble, 1, and 2, then go down with his head. You can't tell me that Archer knows what that's going to happen. I don't get why we can't say, thank God Cleary's okay, but also, Archer, you've done nothing wrong here. And the thing is, Michael Christian can't do that, but the guy who got his head taken off in Cleary can. So apparently Jackson Archer messaged Luke Cleary, not after the game, a day after, said to him that he feels really, really sorry for what happened and he hopes that he's okay. And Cleary messaged him back pretty quickly. This is according to David Zeta, by the way. He came back pretty quickly and said that he was okay, and to his credit, that he said that Archer wasn't at fault and he's got nothing to stress about. The players understand what's happening. Majority of people around the country understand that it's not much Archer could do. We can understand as a supporter base or AFL fans that it was a bad thing that happened. It didn't look good. But obviously, and I know people bring this up all the time, but it's a contact sport, okay? Things are going to happen that you can't control. Like 2 players going for the football, sometimes incidents are going to happen. And at the end of the day, it's not like the Scrimshaw one when he slung an arm. Like, he deserves 3 weeks. I don't know why Hawthorn are challenging that. You guys will know more. Players are challenging what they've done over the week. I don't know why the Swans aren't challenging McInerney's, even though I think probably it's not a surprise, but, you know, you understand. Anyway, I'm back on Archer. Fucking sorry. I mean, if you're new to the podcast, this is basically what it is. I ramble for about half an hour. My brother comes here. Maybe I go for an hour, and then that's the episode. So glad that you joined me. If you hear from the Daniel Gorringe video, Richmond Gorringe video, glad to have you here. But anyway, with the Archer stuff, no way should Archer be missing 3 games or any games in particular at all for that incident. It's just sorry that happened to Cleary. I'm really happy that he's okay. But Archer, it's not your fault. Look, I know it's hard for Cleary to do this as well, but when you're going down for the football now, players are taught that you've got to turn your body. Now, Cleary obviously fumbled the footy and then, you know, went for it again, but you can't lead with your head because that's just what's going to happen. And it's unfortunate, but I'm sure the Bulldogs are talking to him now like, look, to try and avoid that again, because we can't have that happen because it was so bad for you, that if that happens again, you know, something could happen seriously for his career. You just need to protect yourself. So if you're going to do that, if you're going to go for the footy again, we want you to get the football. You have to turn. You have to turn, use your hips to go for the football. With that being said, let's move to our preview to round 1. Let's get into the first game. It is the game we will be live streaming on the channel this week. It is a Thursday night contest between Carlton and Hawthorn. And let's start with the Blues because it is such an important week for them. Do I think they have a chance? Probably not. I really don't think they do. I think that their game plan has been so stale for a while now, especially going forward. They were very, very poor last week, to say the least. And they're coming up against one of the hottest teams in the comp in Hawthorn. Carlton will respond. I think that's a pretty safe bet. How much they respond, I can't see it being anywhere closer than a 30-point game. I think that Hawthorn will win this one pretty comfortably in the end. The bets say they are $1.40 Hawthorn. Carlton are $2.96. I think it could be worse than that. To be honest, I think how this game will play out is that Carlton will have a pretty strong first term. May not be in front, but will keep it close. And then I think Hawthorn will slowly but surely just push them down into a point where they will get beaten by 6 or 7 goals, to be honest. I think this will be a pretty easy win for Hawthorn. Their defence is so solid. I think they'll easily combat Carlton's way of going forward, just bombing high and long. I think the Battle, Barras, and even Sicily, if he plays down back, will just easily intercept mark. We saw that against Sydney a couple of weeks ago, so I think they'll just play that easily. And then up forward, their small forwards are way too dangerous. So I think Hawthorn win this one by 6 or 7 goals, to be honest, at a minimum. After that, we get to the Friday night game between the Bulldogs and the Pies. This is at the MCG. It is a Bulldogs home game. I believe it's because it's an anniversary game for them, their 150th year celebration. So it's still, it's a home game for the Dogs, but I mean, it's a Collingwood home game, another one, let's be honest. Collingwood were very good last week against Port Adelaide. I do think that Collingwood will go far this year. I do think that the Bulldogs had a very good win last week as well. I think it was a very underrated win. I don't think many people are talking about how well the Bulldogs did. They had so many of their big players out, and the fact that they were able to show up against North Melbourne, who there were quite a lot of expectations around North this year, and the Dogs dealt with them pretty convincingly in the end. They stayed in front the whole night. Ed Richards looks like a really good prospect going into this season as a midfielder. We saw him a little bit last year playing in the mids. I definitely think there's a chance that he could be an All-Australian smoky at the end of the year. He does bring something different to that Bulldogs midfield, and I think that he could be something this year for them. Bailey Dale was brilliant as well. And I did like the look of Aaron Norton and Sam Darcy up forward. I do like the two-prong forward line. We'll see how that happens when Jamara comes back, but I do like the way that they were lined up in this game. I do think that they may struggle against the 3 tools of Collingwood in Myercheck, McStay, and Membry, so I have to wait and see how that plays out, and it'll be interesting to see if someone goes to Nick Dacos. We saw he had a very good game against Port Adelaide on the weekend, despite having a bit of a matchup with Willem Drew. I think that the Bulldogs' decimated defence could face some really hard times down there with a dangerous Collingwood forward line. I think their midfield can stack up, but I think if Nick Dacos gets on top, I think the Pies will win. And that's where I'm going with this tip. I'm going to be tipping Collingwood. I think the Dogs had a good win last week, but it was against a lesser opponent. I think Collingwood being a team that I think is going to be up there when the season gets to a close, I think that Collingwood win this one, and I think they'll win it pretty well in the end. Next, we get to Sunday game, the Sunday mid-game. It is North Melbourne v Melbourne. Now, the reason I want to talk about this one is I think this is a very interesting contest. Now, this is played at Marvel, so at least Melbourne won't look like they're playing in front of no one at the MCG. But nonetheless, I think this is a very interesting contest. North Melbourne showed some good signs last week, but I did say it in the review, they have to start winning games. There's no more of this, we were gallant in defeat and that sort of stuff. They need to start winning games. They've finally got a list that has experience in winning games. You look at Parker, Daniel, that they've brought into the club, and then they've got these younger guys who want to start winning games. They need to start winning. I think there is a chance they can get their first win of the season here, North. However, Melbourne looked extremely good against the Giants last week. They had so many opportunities to win that game, but just unfortunately the Giants won in the end, pipped them at the post. I think if North Melbourne can get lucky to kick some goals, he kicked 5 in his first game of the season, so if he can kick another 5, that'd be brilliant. You can't really bank a player on getting 5 every week, though. North Melbourne have to find some other avenues to goal. And if Cam Zurhaar kicked straight last week, they have a much more of a chance of beating the Bulldogs. He 1 goal 4. If they can find some goals out of Zurhaar, out of Curtis, and then their midfield as well, I think they can win this game. However, I will be tipping Melbourne because their performance last week really almost shocked me to an extent. I thought they'd take a while into their season to show some good signs that they've rebuilt into a better team than what they were last year. The likes of Oliver, Petrarca looked really, really good. Their forward line looked pretty solid as well, and their defence stood up even without Stephen May. So I think Stephen May should be back this week. That's why I'm picking Melbourne. I think they look very good. They kind of surprised me on their performance against GWS in round 1. So I'm going to be picking Melbourne. They showed a little bit better signs, but North, I think they have a chance in this game. And then finally, we get to Fremantle v Sydney. What a contest this is. 2 teams that are expected to be up the top throughout the season, both losing their opening games. Sydney losing their second game against the Lions last week. They were without Shea Bolton, the Dockers. They were without a bit of run, but they were without a lot of heart in that game against the Cats. I thought maybe they had a bit of a chance in that third quarter when Murphy Reid went crazy with those 4 goals in 10 minutes. But it seemed like that point in the game was the only highlight for the Dockers. They got smashed. Their midfield of the Cats just dominated, and they lowered their colours, the Dockers, I would say. It was round 1. They were expected to do big things this year. They were kind of questioned after that Indigenous All-Stars game, but they shrugged it off saying, they weren't playing at their best. They were not trying to show the competition what they're made of. And in that trial game against the Demons, they looked a lot better. But their first game of the season against the Cats, they had an opportunity to show some good signs, and they can't even make the excuse that they had a game in hand, the Cats, because they had the week off. The Dockers, I think, should have had a very good performance, but they didn't show a lot. Now, this week, we'll see what happens. Looking at Sydney, though, after the review, looking at it, I'm actually a little bit more disappointed in the Swans' loss against the Lions. Looking back at it, yes, Sydney had some chances to win that game, but Sydney should have never been in that position. I think that the Swans were very disappointing, the fact that they didn't win this game, because you got to remember, the Lions had such a hard week. Well, 2 weeks, basically. They had their game postponed. They've had training. They haven't been able to train at their facilities because of all the flooding after Cyclone Alfred. And then they've had to train in Sydney. So limited prep time, limited training sessions, and they still beat up on a team who had a game in hand. I'm very disappointed by the Swans' start to this year. The Tom McCartan move, I'm giving it 1 more week, and if it doesn't work this week, I'm moving him into defence. I know Dean Cox wants to have his own spin on things as his new coach, but he needs to realise that if he loses 3 or 4 or 5 games in a row here, his season's gone. And if he doesn't get a win in the next couple of weeks, the heat's going to start to get to him. So if it doesn't work this week, he needs to say, okay, I got it wrong, chuck him back in defence, because this week is going to be very interesting as well. The Dockers' tall forwards in Amos and Tracy, and then the resting ruck, and it's either Reedy or Jackson. The Swans' defence don't really stand up here. I really struggle to see how the Swans win this game without McCartan going into the defensive 50 here and stopping one of their key tools for the Dockers. So that's the reason why I'm picking Fremantle, because I think their tall forwards will stand up. I think they will respond from last week's performance. I think that was a bit of a mulligan. I'm going to give them that. But that's where I'm really concerned about the Swans right now. But let's get to the tips. So, of course, my brother has given me his tips as well for this week, so we don't have to worry about that. My tips are Hawthorn over Carlton, Collingwood over the Bulldogs, the Crows over Essendon, Port Adelaide over Richmond, Geelong over St Kilda, Brisbane over West Coast, Melbourne over North Melbourne, and Fremantle over the Swans. And my brother's tips for this week are Hawthorn over Carlton, Collingwood over the Western Bulldogs, the Crows over Essendon, Port Adelaide over Richmond, Geelong over St Kilda, Brisbane over the West Coast Eagles, Melbourne over North Melbourne, and he's picked the Swans over Fremantle. Now, my brother's given a little bit of an explanation as to the difference as to why he's picked the Swans over Fremantle in Perth. He said the injuries to Fremantle are mounting up quite a lot, and the Swans have looked a lot better in the matches that they've played so far. So that's a little bit of an explanation. I tend to agree on the injury front, but also think the Swans are going to struggle with the key forwards of the Dockers. So that's the one difference we have in the tips this week. But of course, if you guys remember last week, we did have our certainty tips. And both of us got our certainty picks right for last week. I picked the Crows to beat St Kilda, and my brother picked Collingwood to beat Port Adelaide. Both of them are correct. We've both only got one certainty tip wrong so far this year. Can't remember. The certainty tips at the end of the year, we are going to tally up all the wrong ones, and that's the amount of chilies we're going to have to eat on the Boundary Riders Awards live stream night. But my brother got to pick first this week. His certainty tip is Port Adelaide to beat Richmond. My certainty pick is Fremantle to beat Sydney. So, of course, if you can't remember as well, the certainty pick, you have to pick a team that lost the previous week. You can't pick a winner. So that's why he has picked Port Adelaide over Richmond. I've tipped Fremantle over Sydney. I almost changed my tip to Richmond after my brother said that, but I think that Port Adelaide will win that game. Let's get to the ladder for the tips on our channel. So at the top is a person who used his Joker. So if you don't know what the Joker is, basically you get double the tips that week. He's gone bold and picked the double the tips in round 1. He got 12, so that means he only got 6 tips. So not the greatest, considering a lot of us got pretty decent tips in the first round. So the top dog is on top with 12 tips after round 1. Looking at second, we've got Mateus. He is on 9 tips in total. He's on top with Lockie Footy Tips with the 9 tips as well. I'm currently in 16th spot with 7 tips. That's the only 7 I've got because I got 7 in round 1, got 0 in opening round. My brother is sitting on 8 tips. All of them he got in round 1 as well. At the moment, I would say, I'm sorry to the top dog if you're watching, but at the moment, I'm saying Mateus is on top with the 9 tips. So after that, of course, we get to my brother's bets for the week. I'm begging him to think of a bloody name of his segment, but apparently he's too good for us, apparently. He can't even be here. He can't even show up, all right? Maybe we should have given him the 3-week suspension. You know, that's what I'm going to do. He's not allowed on the episode for 3 more weeks. But anyway, he's made the bets this week. Of course, for the Thursday night contest for the stream, Carlton v Hawthorn. And he's got his outside the boundary bet, which I told him to call the fucking... What did I tell him to call it? The pushing the boundary bet. But anyway, it's his own segment. He can do what he wants. That's obviously fine. And what's the other one? The certainty... Was it the certainty bet? I think he calls it the certainty bet. Anyway... Here's my brother's bets for this week's round of footy.
Let's get straight into it. We'll start with the same game multi this week. Thursday night footy, Carlton v Hawthorn. First leg is Hawthorn to win 1 to 39 points. Second leg is Tom de Koning for 20 plus disposals. And finally, the third leg is Jack Ginnivan for a goal, valued at $4.20. My certainty bet this week is the Adelaide Crows to cover the line, currently at -6.5, valued at $1.90. Finally, my outside the boundary bet is Riley Thilthorpe to kick 3 plus goals, currently valued at $4. And as always, guys, gamble responsibly.
And finally, we have our AFL Fantasy chat. So, good week from both of us. My brother had a really good week. And if you haven't seen it yet, we obviously do our review of the AFL Fantasy stuff over here on this channel. So, we're going to be doing that every single week and then adding it as a clip into the podcast just so you guys can have it in a full... I like the podcast to be like a roundup of the whole round going into next week as well. So that's how we're going to be structuring it. The AFL Fantasy review will be coming out on Tuesday afternoons with the podcast coming out obviously on the Wednesday morning. So if you haven't seen it, the AFL Fantasy review, here it is now. So let's get through the review for the AFL Fantasy for round 1. And I'll start with my team. We'll talk about my brothers in a second. I had an okay week. I'll give it an okay week. Wasn't a massive week. I'll give it that. I got 2,087 points. Now looking at it, I had some really good performances from Harry Sheasel and Max Holmes, Dawson and Rosie, Gawn and Koning, and then McRae and Bailey Smith. So, look, all my premiums, bar Jason Orr and Francis in every single position, did really well. I'll be really happy with that. My problem was a lot of my rookie sort of players and players around the mid-price. Harry Perryman, I don't know what the fuck happened to him, but 49 points. Like, in his opening round, he scored over 100, and then he just pulls out nothing in the game when they dominated. Anyway, the unfortunate injury to Cleary gave Cleary a chance. I thought he was going to have a big game. He only scored 33 and then got that tragic injury late in the game. Luckily, he's okay, but I'm going to have to get rid of him this week. Will Ashcroft, really disappointing. I thought for sure that with the actual games, he didn't have a very good preseason game, so I was like, I don't care. He's going to be fine when the actual games come to the fore. But unfortunately, he only scored 66, so I was really disappointed by that. And then Finn O'Sullivan, look, it was his first game. Can't be too disappointed. He only got 51, but I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world. Hugo Garcia and Riley Sanders. Sanders only got 72. I thought he would have done a bit better, but it was his first game of the year. Hopefully, he can improve on that. And Hugo Garcia had, I think, the third amount of CBAs for midfielders for St Kilda. Just couldn't get going, unfortunately. It was a tough game for the Saints, though, so hopefully he will start to get into his season after a really good preseason, but we'll have to wait and see how that goes. The best player I want to talk about is Tom De Koning, 132. They got beaten, Carlton, against Richmond of all teams, but he was their standout. 132 was the top scorer for me this week. I picked a good captain though. Max Gawn got 127, so 254. Really increased my price, which I was really happy with, so I'll take that. Looking at the rookies though, I didn't really pick the greatest. Zach Reed was good. He got 63. Murphy Reed, if it wasn't for his 4 goals in 10 minutes, it wouldn't have been a good decision, but other than that, he did okay. But then there were a couple of not the greatest. James Leake only scored 14, and he played pretty much the full game. So I was really disappointed by that. Archer Reed, I should have gone with Harry Boyd. I was tossing and turning. I went with the multiple positions. That wasn't the right decision, though. Should have done better. And Sam Davidson, I'm happy that I put him on the bench. 53 is not the worst, but as an emergency, when I was expecting him to score around 60 to 70, 53 is not the greatest. But look, at the end of the day, I don't really mind. I can take that. And then looking at my brother's team, he did really well. He scored 2,175. Now, he actually ranked inside the top 1,000 for the whole of AFL Fantasy. He ranked in 845. So I'm not going to say he copied my team because he didn't, but I think what he's done is he's taken a lot of my advice over the years when I've been really carrying the AFL Fantasy in our family, and he's done really well to keep up. So I do congratulate him on a really good performance, and I'll be like the guru for him from now on because he did really well. But looking at both the teams, looking at his team, he had captain on Jordan Dawson. He did really well. He did have Toby Nankervis. Now, Gawn did score more, but Nankervis is cheaper. So I actually like that move that he did. And some of his team, and his team's actually really, really good. His midfield, none of them scored under 70, and one of them was James Peatling. So that probably wasn't the greatest pick, but I mean, you take it when you score. When your lower price players like O'Driscoll and Ashcroft both score 80s, and then Lucas Camporali, who was literally a basement price player, gets 76, you take that 100%. And the one thing he did as well is he actually didn't pick Harry Perryman. A lot of people picked Harry Perryman. He went with Jaden Short. It's a 30. It's not a massive difference. Short only got 85, but I mean, the fact that he scored that well is very good. And then he did take the score of Zach Reed, so that's a good score as well when he had Rhett Bazzo out. So overall, with a score of 2,175, he's beaten me, and he's in a better position than I am right now in the AFL Fantasy League. But before we go any further, a message from me. If you guys enjoy the content and you want to see more, then make sure to become a member on the channel today. For just $4 a month, you can get early access to video essays, access to live recordings of the Boundary Riders podcast, along with exclusive stream perks and much more. And something that I'm super excited to introduce to channel membership this year is the members vote. Every week with the review, you can cast your vote to have your say on the Boundary Riders medal. So for all that and more, click the link down below, and for the added bonus of getting an extra inch onto your member, then do it now. But anyway, let's get back into the content. But let's get to our trades for this week. So my trades at the moment are Connor Stone out for Xavier Lindsay, and I got rid of Luke Cleary or Trainer. So basically what I've done here is I've seen that Trainer's going to get cash. It looks like he's going to get games. So I'm putting Trainer in. Looks like he's going to get a good use. Cleary obviously out with injury, and he could be out for a bit. So that's really unfortunate. And then Connor Stone went up 50k from his 2 games that he's already played. But the fact is now they've got the bye. I think it's time to just get rid of him. I would have got rid of James Leake, but he's in a position where I can't really get rid of him. So I got rid of Connor Stone at the moment. He only scored a couple of 50s, so I'm okay with that. And Xavier Lindsay, what a performance in his first game. 90 plus, was one of the highest scoring rookies over the weekend. So 363, he's going to skyrocket in price, even if he scores like 50 next week. So I'm happy with that. And he looks like a player that Melbourne are going to build upon. So that's why I got Xavier Lindsay. But with my brother's trades, he got rid of Harvey Langford. for Max Hall for St Kilda, and he got rid of Murphy Reid for Xavier Lindsay. Now, my belief of why he got rid of Murphy Reid is because his score was inflated by the 4 goals in 10 minutes, which he's not going to do every game. But he also picked up Xavier Lindsay, which I feel like is the same reason for me. But Max Hall, in a really disappointing performance from St Kilda, he scored quite well. So I can see why he picked him up. Midfield forward as well. So good little bit of versatility there to use him as a reserve going forward. But Harvey Langford did start as the sub, which was really disappointing. I was hoping he was going to play a full game, but let's hope he does in the coming weeks. But finally, let's move to the ladder for our AFL Fantasy competition. Now, I currently sit in 32nd spot. We have about 80 people in the comp, so kind of middle range. My brother did really well. He's in 4th spot right now. But we have to mention, if you guys can see in top spot right now, Lucas M, pub feed with sauce, scored 2,291. Very good score to start off with. If you look at his overall ranking, he is the number 1 AFL fantasy team in the country right now. Maybe the world. I don't know how many people are doing it outside of Australia, but he is the number 1. So if you're watching this, dude, good on you for winning. Represent our channel, okay? Give us credit for your team because you've obviously been watching our tips and not taking them because you're doing really well. So congratulations on Lucas being a part of the league and being on top of the entire competition of AFL Fantasy. So he's right now in the chance for a car. I think he may have got a gift voucher as well. So if you are here and watching this, congratulations to you, mate, because you did really well. That is basically the review for our AFL Fantasy teams. And just before we end this episode, guys, I wanted to talk about the video essay that I dropped about Daniel Gorringe. I'm sorry if I'm gonna keep on calling him. I can't keep on calling him Richmond. All right. I'm sorry. I'll do it in the comments. I love the jokes that you guys are pulling out in the comments because it's really funny. But the video is performing really well. I really appreciate you guys' support on it. A lot of people are going, guys, don't dead name the poor guy, Little Dan. A lot of people are telling me about their favourite creators in the AFL space. Richmond Gorringe, gonna think this is about him and his doppelganger. I really like the comments. This is really good. A lot of people are saying that they really like the video as well, which I really appreciative of. It's already one of my top performing videos of the year so far. So really appreciate the support. Make sure to let me know down below if you have some topics that you'd like me to do in like a video essay format. I think I've told you guys a few times that for the members, they get a bunch of videos out for video essays because I've been stockpiling them throughout the summer, and then I want to release them every 2 weeks on the main channel so that we can, because last year when I was doing the video essays at first, I did a bunch in a row and then I stopped and then I did a couple at the end of the year. What I want to do this year, I want to keep it a lot more consistent. So you guys, like every couple of weeks, you're like, oh great, another video essay from the Boundary Riders channel. I want to watch it. You're ready for it. So then I can focus on the other stuff. Like I'm doing the trade videos every month. We do the tips every week. We do the podcast every week. We're doing the review every week. So I want to keep up to date with that. But then I can chuck the video essay out as well. You do realize that I ramble in these. I have a script that I follow to an absolute fucking T for the video essays because you can hear how many times I just ramble on and talk about absolute nonsense. Or I stumble and fuck up a word. So that's what you're here for. But anyway, so that's what I'm trying to do with the video essays. Drop them every couple of weeks, and then so they come out with good reviews, and they're usually the top performing videos on the channel. But I want them to be released every couple of weeks so you guys aren't just. Well, I mean, I could just release them all at once, couldn't I? But that would be kind of shit for the rest of the year, wouldn't it? But that's what I kind of want to do. So if you do want to become a channel member, you can obviously click the link down below and you can watch all the video essays. You could binge them all if you want to. I think we've got like video essays all the way up until late July. So if that does interest you and you want to watch them all at once, then you can. If you don't and you just want to wait to watch them throughout the year with the other content, then that's totally fine too. I totally understand it. But that's what I'm kind of doing this year, kind of releasing them. I'll probably be releasing them all the way up until maybe October, and then that will be the end of the video essays for the year because I did release a couple late last year, or I think I released one, and it didn't really perform that well. And, I like the thing is, I really love doing the video essays. It's like one of the really exciting things that I do for the channel, and I really love the support that it gets throughout the year. But I also want it to be seen by people a lot more. And the footy stuff kind of dies off at the end of the year. You probably tell. Everyone gets a bit burnt out from the footy at the end of the season. Like the grand final's over and then we're like, oh, yeah, that's it. You know, we take a couple of months off, and then by January, February, we're like back. We want footy back. But, you know, there's a couple of months there where people are like, oh, fucking go away. I don't want to hear about it anymore. I get it. So that's why I kind of release these. That's why I kind of bank them up throughout the summer, so then I can just release them throughout the year, and then I can focus on other stuff so that we have the content coming out consistently. We have videos every single week. You know, basically at the moment, we're releasing video on Sunday night for the review, Monday afternoon for either a video essay or the trade videos, Tuesday for the tips, and then Wednesday we've got the podcast. So we've got basically 4 days worth of videos out, and then on Thursdays we do the live streams. So that's what I'm kind of doing right now. I think that's where it's really going to work this year. I did say at the start of the year, like, my goals for this channel throughout the 2025, and I think we can definitely double our subscriber count. I think we can hit 5K. I think we had about 2K at the start of the year. I think we can hit 5K pretty easily. I want to try and upgrade every single part of the channel as well, you know, other socials and that sort of stuff. But YouTube, I've always loved the platform, and I really think AFL YouTube can hit new heights in the next couple of years, because I think the old media, they're definitely trying to re-innovate, I guess is the word. But I think that overall, people are kind of tired of listening to those guys. They want to listen to new voices, and, you know, people want to kind of think about, you know, what do you want to talk about in the pub, and want to hear from other people, and, you know, they want to listen to some fuckwit with glasses on, looking like, I think someone said that I look like Dilbert. I mean, I think they want to look like, my name's Dylan. I don't know if he knew that. If he does, stop stalking me. But anyway, I think they want to hear from the regular Joe blogs. They don't want to hear from fucking Kane Corns every week. Like, don't get me wrong, I understand why people want to listen to Kane Corns, but also I think some people are like, oh, fuck off, Kane. We don't want to fucking listen to you anymore. All right? So, yeah, that's what I'm kind of looking at. Enough rambling from me. That's the end of the episode. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. If you did enjoy this episode of the Boundary Riders podcast, make sure to leave us a like on YouTube and subscribe to the channel. Nearly at 200 subscribers, so really appreciate that. And if you did enjoy it over on Spotify, make sure to leave us 5 stars and make sure to follow us so you're notified on the podcast and the review every single week. But again, guys, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. But we'll catch you all next week.